Hey guys, today is engine day. Got the head laying here and water pump and oil pump, that type of thing. And then also in the back we've got the engine. Had to lay it a certain way so that we um, didn't want to bend any valves. You can kind of see there so quite a few segments ago I put prime on the transmission and some of these other parts that are the green color for the engine. And since we have the engine arrival today, I need to get green paint on these so I can free up the engine stand and get the engine mounted on there so I can prime and paint it also. So the goal today is get green on these parts and get this transmission off there once I can touch it. That way I can get the motor pulled off the back of the truck and get it mounted on this stand. You got the block hooked up, used the similar bolt positions I did before, and I was careful to set it on some boards, make sure I didn't hit the crank under there with anything. So now it's free. I'll just let it set out here, and I'll mask this off and get it primed. And I think I can just go ahead and paint the block and all these other things at the same time. So I'm gonna prepare to get everything that needs green paint ready. Okay, got the motor block all taped off, ready for paint. Transmission is same condition, it's ready. And these parts are ready for paint. And then I also got the water pump, the oil pump. There's the water pump, and then the timing cover. I've also got the head all taped off. I got this on an edge because you gotta be able to paint under there, so that old table's gonna get a little green paint on it. I've got this high temp engine enamel, Bill Hirsch. It's a color that matched the same color when I took the car apart originally. And I'll pour about half of this in my spray can here. We'll see how it sprays. Okay, we got the green paint sprayed to everything. Engine's looking pretty nice there. The other parts back there. So the head got sprayed, and then these other parts back here. So I'm just not going to mess with these for about 24 hours or more, just to let them really dry, and then we'll come back and see if we can put some things together. Okay, we got this transmission. Early on we noticed that there was no cover plate there. Bolt was there, so we've got this painted and ready to put back. So I'm going to make a cover plate for that with a couple washers. I'll use this one and this one, and what I'll do is I'll weld this hole shut, and I'll trace around here and then weld these two washers together. That should make a nice cover plate. Not necessarily pretty, but put some paint on it, it'll be effective. Okay, I think I got the transmission ready to take off the stand now. Got the solenoid put back on. If you remember, the original was defective. I checked this one on the bench, works great. So I've got that connected inside here, painted up that housing, and then this is just the cable stay that comes back to the switch here. And I got the protector plate put back on, and then this is the washers that I welded up to cover that inspection hole. So I think this is ready to set down on the mat over there in the frame, and then I'll just work on getting the engine put on this stand. I got the transmission off. I just set it down on the floor here so that when we get the engine put in, it won't have long distance to go. So now we're ready to put the engine onto the stand. I could assemble it on the lift, but it sways and moves around, so I'll put it over on the stand, and then we can assemble things easier. Okay, now we've got all the tape off and got the engine onto the motor stand. So I'm gonna read the manual, double check, make sure before we start putting everything together. I'll just double check the engine guys, make sure they've got the gears meshed right here for timing, and then we can start to put some things together. Checking the timing, and on this gear there's a 0 here, and just barely see it, but I think a mark on that opposite side. This is cylinder 1 toward the front of the engine. This is the exhaust valve. So right now, top dead center, exhaust valve's open. So this is not top dead center of firing. So I'm going to rotate the engine to move it to that point and see if those two guys, this guy and that guy there, line up to each other. And sure enough, engine rotated. Now it's at the compression cycle. This is top dead center, and we see the two marks line up perfectly. So engine's put together correctly. Getting ready to put the oil pump on. I've just got it loosely on there, and I've engaged the gears, and there's an offset because the distributor shaft comes into this oiler from a gear. So if we go around to the other side, see if we can see that offset down in there. And if we did it correctly, and I've got it on there, you have the offset to the rear of the engine, which is to the left in this picture. And it'll be at a 45-degree angle once you shove it in, which it is. So, and 45 to the counterclockwise. So we've got the pump gear meshed correctly, and we're on the compression stroke, cylinder 1, top dead center. And then for this oil pump, this is the pressure relief valve. And what you do is you can check the oil pressure, and you go ahead and tighten all this up and center that. If you need a little more oil pressure, you can take this out, put a shim in there and screw it back on, and it lets the pressure relief come out a little further and give you more oil pressure. When I took the head to the machine shop, I wasn't sure what all they would need to take off. They did take these two out. There's a plug here. This is part of the oiling system. That one's plugged, and then this one's got this connector here that had to be put back on. And this is the rear of the engine. The front of the engine has the water cooling, and then the carburetor's on the passenger side. And for this oil slinger, it goes on with the small side toward the gear, and then you got to make sure you put the seal back in the timing cover. Okay, we got the timing cover on, the timing mark Goes in those two there. Just now getting the water pump on. Okay, getting the key wheel, timing wheel on here. Pulley goes on first. You got to tap it in to get past the seal, get it to, you know, that point there. And then this wheel has these, there's rubber piece in between these two, and then that same rubber piece is on the back side. So what I found is put the rubber pieces on this guy first, a little bit of, just a tiny bit of oil in these posts, and you can slide that on. Then you put this cap on, and then we finally put bolt with a lock washer. The original lock washer broke off, so I'm gonna go get another one. Okay, got that on. You can see we're still top dead center, and you can kind of, maybe you guys can see that. There's some numbers on there. 0 degrees, we're within a degree or so. I've set the gasket and the head on there now, and start putting some bolts down in there to clamp that. Getting ready to put all the head bolts in. All of them are the same except for this one. You can see here's where the carburetor is, and you come down, here's a corner, and here's a water inlet. It's this one right here. It's got a washer, and it's got this bracket to hold some cables. Other than that, the others are all the same. Quick note before we start to tighten all the studs on the head. These two here hold this bracket for the accelerator cable. So we got to make sure we set those in there before we do the tightening sequence. When you have bolts around the outside, like I'll use for the, you know, lifting the motor off of here, they're toward the end of the tightening sequence. But these are inside, and then don't forget this one has the bracket. So 3 bolts have something under them. Okay, so I haven't tightened these yet, just kind of snugged them just to make them touch. Got the bracket on. I went ahead and put the push rods in and just dropped them in there because I'm making sure that they aren't off to the side or something like that. So I'm making sure they're all seated in the right spots. Now I can go ahead and put these side covers on and the exhaust manifold. Before I put these valve covers on, I'm gonna adjust these exhaust valves, and they're supposed to be the 16 thousandths. If I look here, number 2, set the exhaust valves to 16 thousandths. Doesn't matter whether the engine's hot, cold, or idling, stopped. And then they tell you, you know, rotate it to the lowest position. And then you use a feeler gauge and a couple wrenches. So I've got my feeler gauge with a 10 and a 6 thousandths for the 16. And the guys at the shop told me they put it at 18, but here's the lowest one. The 16, you know, easily goes through there. So that's way more than 16 thousandths. So we'll start making some adjustments to these. It looks like these are an interference type thread. Just starting to drag there. And I just go until I start to feel just a little bit of resistance. So that one's set. I've got all the bolts just run down just to touch the top of the surface, and then you can see the sequence to tighten the heads. And common strategy, kind of start in the center and kind of work your way out to the edges so that you don't create any stress on the head. So I'll begin working them down, and then I'll put it to the spec they have in here for the torque. Okay, next thing I want to do is get this rocker assembly put on there, because I want to spin the motor over to put the oil pan on. If I do that, all the push rods are going to fall out. So we'll go ahead and get this rocker assembly put on here. Okay, so since this valve is currently the one up, that's why it's rocking like this. So what I want to do is loosen all these so that I can get this down, get this tightened the way it's supposed to be, and then we'll come back and make all the valve adjustments. So we'll set it loose so that they can all be adjusted after this. Okay, so that's all the way up. These are all the way down. Now I can put these nuts on. Torque on these is 30 to 35 pounds. And this guy is just the edge is sticking out just enough where the socket will be down in there, so I gotta turn that guy just so I can get the socket on there. I rotated this just a little bit so that the flat side's next to the bolt. socket on there now. And I'll put that back just a little bit. On that one, it was already rotated where I could get the socket on. Okay, so we'll adjust the tappet clearance to 18 thousandths as it says there. I'm not going to be able to do this with the engine idling because it's just here on the stand, so I'll rotate the engine by hand and make sure I've got 18 thousandths gap when the valve is not under tension. Now I want to turn this engine over and put the oil pan on, and then I'll come back and put the exhaust header on. So rotate this guy. It's pretty easy. Upside down here. Get the gasket and wipe up this oil. Make sure we got a clean, dry surface. Notice this gasket from the timing cover is just a little bit proud, and so when we set this gasket in place here, we can see got a little bit of rocking there, so I'm just gonna shave this gasket down flush. That way this has got a good surface. And then also on that seam, I'll probably put some Permatex along those seams there just to make sure that seals off. And here's the rear main seals. We can see we got those guys stuck in there. Got the Permatex, put a nice good bead at that seam there. Shave that gasket. Put a thin bead all the way around. Put the gasket on. And of course, before we put the pan on, we'll put this oil pump pickup on. And one thing the pan is counting on is when you tighten the bolts, it'll compress these neoprene seals to spread out on these seams here. So as we tighten, we'll focus on this end and work our way back. Okay, we got the oil pan installed, snugged up, and oil pump pickup is in there. So now we're ready to put the exhaust header on. That was the one that we did with the white high temp ceramic paint. So we'll get that on. And then at that point, I'm going to be waiting for a fuel pump rebuild, and I'm waiting on the vacuum advance on the distributor. So I may go ahead and mount this engine into the frame after I get this exhaust header on. Then I can bolt that other stuff on because the body's still off the car. If you remember, this was the gasket that was flipped the wrong way, so we've got them oriented correctly. All the holes line up. new gloves on since this thing is white. I get a bunch of fingerprints on it. One nut on here to kind of hold it. At least I'll get the others on. Okay, got the exhaust manifold on. Before I put it on the car, I'll do some touch-up paint. I mean, there's some, I didn't realize this needed to be painted, so I'll brush that in. And then I can touch all these bolts on the outside, touch those up. A couple little spots here and there, got some marks on them, so I'll touch those up before I set the engine in the car. Where I put the motor on the chassis, I wanted to blow the fuel line out, so I just put a sock on the back of this to keep the gas from blowing. And then up on the front end, hooked up a little funnel. I'll pour some gas in there, and then I'll throw some air pressure behind it and flush this out 3 or 4 times just to make sure the fuel line's nice and clear. The first couple flushes, nasty smelling yellow gas, and then after the 3rd, 4th flush, nice clear. So then the last time I just used the funnel and filled the fuel line up so that there's fuel in there. It's not a bunch of air when we get the fuel pump hooked up, and we won't have to work so hard to get fluid moving.